U.S. President Donald Trump and Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky met one-on-one while in Rome for the funeral of Pope Francis on Saturday. The two leaders spoke for about 15 minutes, leaning in close to each other with no aides around them, while seated in St. Peter's Basilica, according to Zelensky's office and images released by Kyiv and Washington. Zelensky spoke briefly about the meeting afterwards.
We had a productive meeting. I don't want to go to a lot of details, if it's possible, because the questions, very sensitive questions, of course, totally it's about how to bring peace.
On social media, the Ukrainian leader said the discussion with Trump could prove historic if results were achieved. After Pope Francis's funeral, Trump took a tough tone on Russian President Vladimir Putin. In a social media post he published while on Air Force One, Trump said there was no reason for Putin to be launching missiles into civilian areas over the last few days. Trump, referring to Putin, added, quote, "It makes me think that maybe he doesn't want to stop the war, and that secondary sanctions on Russia might be necessary." His post was a departure from his usual rhetoric, which has seen the toughest criticism directed at Zelensky. And it comes after 12 people were killed when a missile fired by Russia hit a Kyiv apartment block on Thursday.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
The meeting between Trump and Zelensky at the Vatican was their first since an angry encounter in the Oval Office in Washington in February. It comes at a critical time in negotiations, aimed at bringing an end to the fighting between Ukraine and Russia.
A suspected chemical blast sent clouds of smoke billowing over Iran's largest port on Saturday. Several people were killed and more than 700 were injured in the explosion at Bandar Abbas, Iranian state media reported. State TV aired footage said to show the aftermath of the blast. People are seen walking through a building with debris scattered on the floor. Others are seen outside, some carrying the injured. A spokesperson for Iran's crisis management organization appeared to blame the explosion on poor storage of chemicals in containers. An Iranian government spokesperson, however, said that although chemicals had likely caused the blast, it was not yet possible to determine the exact cause. Officials said activities at the port were halted after the blast. The explosion occurred as Iran began a third round of nuclear talks with the United States and Oman, but there was no immediate indication of a link between the two events. A series of deadly incidents have hit Iranian energy and industrial infrastructure in recent years, with many blamed on negligence. Iran has blamed some on Israel, which has carried out attacks on Iranian soil in recent years. There was no immediate response from Israel's military or Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office when asked for comment on whether Israel was in any way involved in Saturday's explosion.
U.S. President Donald Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, and Russian President Vladimir Putin met in Moscow on Friday to discuss the U.S. plan to end the war in Ukraine, with the Kremlin describing the three-hour meeting as constructive and very useful. Witkoff's latest trip follows talks this week at which Ukrainian and European officials pushed back against some of the U.S. proposals for how to settle the conflict, the deadliest in Europe since World War II. But Trump told reporters on Friday that he believed a peace deal was close.
We're going to try and get out of war so that we can save 5,000 people a week, and that's what my aim is. I want to save 5,000 young men. They happen to be mostly Ukrainian, Russian. That's a big honor if I can do it. I think we're pretty close.
Witkoff's visit comes a day after Trump criticized a Russian missile and drone attack on Kyiv that killed at least 12 people and posted on social media, quote, "Vladimir, stop." On Friday, Kyiv residents brought flowers to a makeshift memorial at the site of the Russian strike. Meanwhile, Russian investigators said a car bomb killed a senior Russian military officer in the town of Balashiha just east of Moscow, in an attack that Russian war bloggers blamed on Ukraine. The killing followed the assassinations of several high-ranking Russian military figures, which Moscow has blamed on Kyiv. Russia and Ukraine have not held direct talks since the early weeks of the war, which started in February 2022. According to text seen by Reuters, the peace proposal Witkoff has presented calls for formal U.S. recognition of Russia's control over Crimea, the Ukrainian peninsula Moscow seized and annexed in 2014. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said this week that recognizing Crimea as part of Russia would violate Ukraine's constitution.
Apple has a strategy for avoiding President Trump's steep tariffs on China, making more of its iPhones in India. A source told Reuters the tech giant is holding urgent talks with manufacturers Foxconn and Tata with the goal of producing most of its U.S.-bound iPhones in India by the end of 2026. Apple and Foxconn did not immediately respond to requests for comment, while Tata declined to comment. Apple sells over 60 million iPhones in the U.S. annually, with roughly 80% of them currently made in China. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has in recent years promoted his country as a smartphone manufacturing hub. While iPhone manufacturing costs in India are 5 to 8% higher than in China, according to the Reuters source, Trump's tariffs on Indian imports are significantly less than those on Chinese goods. The Trump administration this month imposed duties of 26% on imports from India, much lower than the more than 100% China was facing at the time. Washington has since paused most duties for 3 months, except for those on China. The administration has since signaled it is open to de-escalating the trade war between the U.S. and China. The Financial Times first reported about Apple's plan on Friday. The move comes after Apple already shipped some 600 tons of iPhones worth $2 billion to the U.S. in March in an effort to beat Trump's tariffs.
Permettetemi di dire il nostro affetto per lui che si sta
Allow me to say, our affection for him, which is being manifested in this time, must not remain a mere emotion of the moment. We must welcome his legacy and make it part of our lives, opening ourselves to God's mercy and also being merciful to one another.
e diventando anche noi misericordiosi gli uni verso gli altri.